answer to your question is DeepSeek, which in my head I keep thinking of deep think, because they're thinking. They have a second mover advantage. Yeah. The sad thing for them is somebody's coming from behind.
Yes. The mover behind the second mover, right?
Exactly, the third mover.
Morning, welcome to the Northpoint of View here with Dr. Walter Kemmsies. Walter.
Hey, good morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great.
There's a lot in the news right now. Let's step over a couple of these issues and jump into AI right now.
Right, so leave the White House out of it.
For a minute, the next podcast, because you have been really sort of direct when we've talked about AI over the last 6 months or so. I'll paraphrase. It's like they're still first, second grade. They're playing around. They're in a new game that nobody else understands, so they can sort of explain it how they want to. But then DeepSeek came in and rocked everybody's world, big time. And they were able to elevate the game. The other piece is at a much reduced cost basis. And so I think everybody's still reeling, week into this thing. What's your sort of quick takeaway on this whole venture?
Second mover advantage.
Okay.
In technology, it is always about the second mover advantage. IBM, they had the original disk operating system, the original IBM PC. Little minor historical note, but my girlfriend, the one before I married my wife, her father was one of the 3 guys who led the development of the IBM PC.
Wow.
So we were in Boca Raton, and that's where they had the big IBM building. Anyway, Microsoft goes to Japan and buys this disk operating system, and Bill Gates gives it away for free. Bill Gates and his partner and all that. They gave it away for free until everybody was using DOS, disk operating system, for Microsoft and not the IBM system. And so a lot of us at the time incorrectly thought, well, who cares about the software? All of us had to write code. I wrote a lot of code, but you all had to write code if you're going to use a computer, so who cares about the software? It's about the hardware.
Not exactly.
No, the buzzer has gone off many times. It was about
the gong show. We talked about bringing out the gong back for the podcast.
Yes, I watched a YouTube video on that the other day. It was hysterical.
We'll bring out the gong. Han, can we get a gong for podcast?
Yeah, we need a gong.
Rename the podcast the Gong Show too.
I actually, we're going to go off on a tangent. I shouldn't do that.
Second mover advantage.
Second move. So
huge,
in game theory,
huge.
In game theory, you talk about the number of players, what the strategies are, what the players' objectives are, and then you lay out the potential outcomes based on how each one would act, but the outcome depends on how the others act. And that's so you build what's called a payoff matrix. Mm-hmm. And in some games, if it's a repeated game, or if it's a single game, it matters whether you're the first mover or you're not the first mover. And so in technology, the advantage is to the second mover. So Microsoft had the advantage over IBM. Look at the Betamax. Yeah, they were first mover. That did not end well for them.
Gong.
Right, yeah, exactly. And then the guys who came from behind, the Blu-ray or whatever, Netflix. So, you can, if you think about it, every time there's a technological innovation, then there's a second mover advantage. The rinky-dink, stinky little ports in New Jersey were nothing compared to the ports on Manhattan where the bulk ships would show up. Then we started to containerize trade. We needed more room. They expanded in New Jersey, and then New York cried foul and screamed that, you can't take the business away, and a bi-state compact was signed, and that's the port of New York.
By the way, I love the way you took that from AI to computers to the ports. That was a really nice pathway.
Oh, why, thank you. I was trying to avoid the question. No. So let's go to the AI. Back in my day, I played with neural networks, and I played with genetic algorithms, and that came out afterwards, and we could not get it to work. I had an IBM PC, very nice, but it was an 8086 chip. Later came the 8286, 8386, 486, etc. And then we've got the I's, the Intel 1, 3, 5, 7, whatever. And so those chips They didn't work very fast. I worked with the quant guys at UBS, and we literally melted the chips in computers because we had a program on the chips, not on Excel, because it couldn't handle it. And I got called by the CEO for destroying company property. He's a friend of mine, so it was okay. But he's like...
Trying to be an innovator here, right?
Exactly. You're showing up as a saboteur, what's going on? So anyways, it didn't work well. And then there was no memory. I had the biggest memory card in the economics department at the University of Memphis. I had a 20 megabyte memory card. You couldn't store anything on it. And so I'd run the program before I left home for dinner. I come back the next morning, and there's this big printout with a picture of a plunger, and it said program flushed. Okay, day after day after day. I didn't actually get what I was trying to do to work until 2012 with a guy called Dr. Ali Rizvani. And he knew what I had tried to do, and he said, you failed because the computers weren't strong enough. He goes, we got cloud computing, we got faster computers, and we use something called agent-based modeling to simulate with AI the behavior of an economy in 3D space. So we actually got patterns of land use and economic activity that you can see in the real world. So it was very exciting. But this was still based off of what I had done in 92, 93. And what the guys are doing now is they strung a few genetic algorithms together and they go, look, we've advanced AI. You haven't. This is 30 years and you're still doing the same stuff we did, and we couldn't make it work. Now that you've got computers that can, no big deal. So what they're doing, though, is, and the reason I had brought up the ports is when I joined the port industry, I abandoned econometrics. I had 3 specializations in my PhD program. One of them was in econometrics. And econometrics and all statistics and all regression analysis, all of that stat stuff you see is about correlation.
Yeah.
And correlation is not the same as causation. It's the first thing they pound in your head. Okay, so correlation, not a causation. And you sent me a really terrific article in the Wall Street Journal about how AI was morphing and all of the stuff that we see, including ChatGPT and ChatGPT for logistics and all of these management consulting firms. We're bringing AI to your company. No, you're not. And that article is brilliant. And anybody who's watching the video, if you're interested, email Mark or me. We'll forward you the URL, so you can read it yourself. It's a long article, but it was really worth reading. Mark destroyed my productivity that morning because I actually read it, and then I started to think, and next thing you know, I wasn't getting other work done. But it was worth it. So what they talked about were tokens. And you see, what happens with the AI, and I'm going to simplify this a lot, is it grabs stretches of text, and the text says, thank you. And then the AI looks at all of the responses. So they go through articles and emails and millions and millions and millions of texts. And they see that 99% of the time, thank you was followed by you're welcome. And 1% of the time, screw you. But, so this thing AI has to guess what would be an appropriate response to somebody saying thank you. And 99% odds, it should be you're welcome. So that's what it goes with. Now, if you have longer text.
That's the correlation.
Yeah, exactly. You have longer text, you have other kinds of text that correlate with responses that were given in the past to that.
Right.
Mark, you can sit there for the rest of your life pulling all of the emails in the world, all the articles in the world, all of the videos in the world, all the movies in the world, all the plays in the world, and grab all that text. And that's what these guys have been doing. Why? Because A, they're stupid. There's no other way to put this. And what I mean by stupid is something you taught me. Stupid is thinking you got it all figured out, and you're running with it. And in that article, it started talking. So they refer to all of these stretches of text as tokens. Okay, ditch that. Thinking, if you took logic in college, you would have taken symbolic logic. And in symbolic logic, it's about truth tables. In the truth table, you make a list of assumptions. You have some quote-unquote logical operators like or, and, etc. And then that tells you what can you conclude. So, Walter walks in the door. He's very wet and carrying an umbrella. Those are 2 assumptions. What kind of things can you conclude? It's raining outside. Right? So I oversimplify, but you get the idea. Well, you can program large numbers of assumptions with all the operators and what are the conclusions. And now you're thinking. You're actually thinking. You're not sitting there going, well, what answer worked in the past? No, you are saying, okay, given what I know, what would be logical deductions I can pull from this? I can list them and say, I think the most likely is this because of blah, blah, blah. And, in my life as an analyst, when I started, I had to assume 80% of the inputs for my models, for my forecast, and 20% was data. And these lucky kids today, 80% of what they do is data and 20% are assumptions. So as we get more and more big data, the less we have to assume. So that thinking, using truth tables, that kind of symbolic logic, is what we're seeing American AI move to. And the Chinese guys looked at that, at what was going on, and being very well-trained scientists said, tokens? Let's cut to the chase here. We need causation, not correlation, causation. If you give me the assumptions, I know what the effect will be. If I take containers off a ship, too many too fast, I'm going to get stuck. I got too many sitting on deck, and now I can't maneuver the cargo on deck and the port shuts down. That's causation. Okay, now I could grab the data and say, well, there's a high correlation between a lot of boxes coming off the ships and the port productivity declining. No, you can model this in real time with real data. And that's the huge, but not subtle, but a huge shift. It's like, stop using your past experience and think.
I saw an article this morning, and it was, again, this story is unfolding, right? This is, to me, it's fascinating because we've been banging on this AI for 6 months. We've been, watching, a handful of stocks just sort of soar like meteors.
Right.
And then DeepSeek has a press conference and $1 trillion of value evaporates, right?
Exactly.
Where did it go? It's gone. And the thing I saw in the paper this morning, in the journal, was the impact on the power grid, how efficient some of these operating chips are and systems are compared to the models they were using a year ago, and the impact on our grid. The power companies across the country, across the world, are now sort of stepping back and taking a little bit different look on this. And you're talking hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars in investment that are shifting off of an idea, right?
Right.
A move from this set of assumptions to a different set. And it's fascinating to watch.
See, what's so critical about this is, whether you're an environmentalist or not, or a business entrepreneur or not, it has always been about getting more with less. And we have a grid. And if the grid, there's something called a margin, an operating margin. And for the electric grid, it's 90%. You don't want the demand to exceed 90% of the capacity, because if you get a spike and you overshoot 100%, you burn out the grid and then you get to rebuild it. And with all of the growing demands being put on the grid, recharge electric stuff, and then you have the data centers. Then we have more manufacturing in the U.S. Jim and I have talked to you about it. We don't have the power for all this.
Right.
And so we need to use everything far more efficiently.
Yeah.
And
the
wisdom of what you said is so deep and wide.
One of the first weeks that we were together and just starting this range of conversations, we had one that was just about cost.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's cost. Stupid.
Yeah.
Right? Back of the head.
That's what
right?
John Rickless did to me. He took the yellow sticky. After I left Wall Street, he goes, you're always about demand and this Keynesian stuff. And he writes cost in big red letters. On my computer screen, he goes, don't take it off.
Don't take it off. And so there is a limit to what any market can accept in terms of increased cost.
Right.
The consumer just can't keep paying more for whatever the item is.
All these cost curves end up going vertical in the end. It's the rule is 80%. So once you get to 80% of design capacity, your cost curve goes vertical on you. And what that means is now you're paying overtime, and people, you can get the volume done over that year, but only if you pay a lot of overtime.
Yeah.
And that's where that cost curve goes nuts on you.
Yeah.
Like the ports back in COVID, when they were working overtime, the overtime bills for them were huge.
You hit the wall at some point.
So, and that is what we mean. But anyways, just to sum up, answer to your question is DeepSeek, which in my head I keep thinking of deep think, because they're thinking. They have a second mover advantage.
Yeah.
The sad thing for them is somebody's coming from behind.
Yes. The mover behind the second mover, right?
Exactly, the third mover. We'll see.
Walter, thanks, man. Great being with you.
Yeah, always good talking to you, Mark.
All right. Thanks, guys.